Thank you, Sally. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many of you. I'm Val Brown. I look after the Churches team for Christian Aid Scotland. And it's my great privilege this morning to introduce our two keynote speakers, Solomon Waltensithik and Netsanet Faliki. Solomon is a senior project officer specialising in climate change and is based in our Ethiopia team. He actually visited Scotland in 2010 and spoke with supporters then, so some of you may very well recognise him. Netsanet is an emergency programme officer for Christian Aid based in South Omo, Ethiopia, and has been directly involved in Christian Aid's response to the desert locust infestation. We are delighted to have them both with us this morning. When we spoke to them before, we were troubled with intermittent internet connection, and so this session, along with all the other sessions, will be captioned so you don't miss anything. And don't worry, we do have a backup recording of their presentation, so you will definitely get to hear from them. Solomon, Netsanet, welcome, and let me pass over to you. Solomon, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to meet you all online. My colleague Netsanet is not joining because of internet connectivity. Is not joining us, and I will be covering his part. My name is Solomon Waltensithik. I'm working for Christian Aid in Ethiopia, and I've been working in Christian Aid for the last 12 years. Now I'm a senior program officer for climate change, and I will be talking about overall situation of the country, context of the country, the major challenges that we have, development challenge that we have in Ethiopia, and also I'll be talking about some of the initiative we took this year to respond to one of our challenges, which is a desert locust infestation challenge. So going to the context for those who do not know about Ethiopia, probably Ethiopia is situated in the Horn of Africa, and it's the second most populous country. We have around 112 million people here. The mainstay of the people is agriculture. Around 85% of the population live on crop agriculture and livestock rearing, and almost the agriculture is dominated by small-scale subsistence farming. They use very old and traditional method of farming, and their farm is based on rain-fed agriculture. They have to wait for the rain to come to plant their crops. Giving you this background, I will take you through some of our challenges. Please, yeah, sorry. Sorry, the slide is moving back and forth, so now it's stable, I think. When I talk about the development challenge, like other countries of the world, Ethiopia was not an exception. We have been challenged by the impact of COVID. The rate of infestation in Ethiopia is the fourth in the African country. Out of 52 African countries, we stood fourth with 100, around 100, more than 120,000 infestation, infection, and the number of days exceeded more than 2,000. The COVID pandemic has resulted in significant social and economic challenges. We are experiencing increased food price. The basic food items are significantly increasing, and because of this lockdown of economic activity, there is a rising of unemployment, rising number of unemployment, and you can see increase in the level of poverty because of slowdown in growth. We also faced last year, starting from last year, we faced the worst locust invasion in decades. Some say it happened after 25 years, but some still says this level of invasion, locust invasion, occurred in the past 70, I mean, before 70 years. It has undermined our agriculture. We said, as I mentioned, that we are living mainly with agriculture, and our agriculture is rain-fed. So almost the locust has damaged the crops in the field of some of the population. And this has threatened the food security and the livelihoods of millions of people. Next. Another challenge is political instability. We have now a bit unstable, our political situation, following the leadership change in 3 years back. It followed with different types of social unrest, ethnic clash, and this has negatively impacted various sectors, the agriculture sector, the tourism sector, and other sectors have been affected. Another challenge is the rate of population growth. Our population is increasing from time to time, and of recent record, around 70% are used out of 112 million, nearly 80 million are used under 35 years age. And you can imagine the having poor economy, how the economy can absorb this increasing rate of population. So our unemployment is another challenge, and the economy is not creating sufficient employment for this ever-growing number of population. And annually, more than 2 million workforces are entering into the labor market. The remaining are because of desperately they are migrating to different countries, to the Middle East, to South Africa, and to Europe. You can see migration. Next. Another challenge is climate change. Ethiopia is one of the countries which is impacted by impact of climate change significantly. It's characterized by increasingly unpredictable rains. We don't know when the rain comes and when it goes. So for a country which is dependent on rain-fed agriculture, you can imagine how important predictable rain mean. But because of climate change, the rain is not unpredictable. And because of that, crops have been failing successively in the field. Farmers plant once they get rain, and suddenly the rain stops and the crop dry up in the field. And this has been happening successively, especially starting from 2016. The rain was not there for in 2017, 18, and there has been successive harvest failure during this period. Another is increased temperature and prolonged drought. it has resulted, especially in the lowland part of the country, where people are dependent on livestock breeding. The drought means completely killing of the livestock, the cows, and there has been widespread livestock deaths and the disease of livestock as well, which follows the increased temperature. In some places in the highlands, to the opposite, we have been experiencing intensive and regular rainfall, and which led to flooding and erosion. It has been, especially in the past year, flooding was very, very harsh, and it has resulted in low agricultural production and the damage of crops in the field and the properties as well. Another challenge is because of variability of weather conditions. This variable weather condition has created favorable conditions for desert locust reproduction and development. In fact, the desert locusts have been reproduced not only in Ethiopia, but also in the Middle East, in the surrounding countries like Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, and the desert locusts follow the wind direction, and it's spread to different areas. It can migrate following the wind direction. It can migrate up to 200 kilometers per day. So if you see in the desert locust in North Kenya, it can suddenly appear in Ethiopia just in one day. So the climate has also created different favorable conditions, and in some places you can see green vegetation. The temperature has become very high, and this is a very conducive environment for the desert locust to reproduce. And the impact of desert locusts, as you can see, it was the worst in the past 25 years, and approximately it affected around 1 million people in the past, and already 8.5 million are already facing food insecurity, and a man is trying to protect his farmland helplessly, but yeah, you can see the magnitude of the infestation. Next. This is also a picture of how the desert locust impacted the area. The woman farmer is also trying to protect her crop, and on the right, the locust has completely damaged the farmland, the mature maize crop, but people are gathering just the residues for firewood, for feeding their animals. When we go to the response following this, the response in South Omo, next please. Using the Scotland government emergency humanitarian in the emergency fund, we tried to respond in one of the highly affected area, which is located around 800 kilometers southwest of the capital. And this place is mainly dependent on pastoralism and agropastoralism, dependent on animal husbandry. In this place alone, we have more than 16 distinct ethno-linguistic group which are dependent on livestock breeding. The area is very drought prone. The communities are dependent, as I mentioned, the traditional livestock production, but on the other hand, the area is affected by recurrent drought. There is a serious shortage of drinking water because of the number of livestock. You can see pasture degradation, and because of, again, scarcity of feed and water, there is a frequent conflict over resource like pasture, water, and the temperature also has brought impact on animals, and human and animal disease is common in this place. And the picture you can see is during desert drought period, the women who are mainly responsible for fetching water are trying to scratch the river bed, scratching the sand, and fetch water for household consumption and for their livestock. Next. Yeah, this is a picture taken from the area where we responded. The desert locust affected around 200,000 hectares of crop, pasture land, and bushland in the area. So using the Scottish Government Humanitarian and Emergency Fund, which is around 112,000 GBP, we designed a project with project objective of controlling desert locust infestation and the protection of food crops. We mainly supported the community and the local government by providing pesticides so that they can spray when desert locust appears in their crop field and bushland and grasslands. And we trained community workers and scouts. We mobilized the community and trained them on how to use the pesticides and protect their cropland. And another intervention, I mean, the objective of the project was to improve food security. We provided emergency crop and fodder seeds for especially for those whom cropland and pasture land was significantly damaged by desert locusts. We provided them with seed and fodder land so that they can replace their damaged field. And we provide the government with logistics and technical supports on how to control and make surveillance of swarm. So this is basically the objective. And with response, we supported with the pesticides, with 2,131 liters of pesticides and protective kits for community sprayers. We also provided with the personal protective equipment. They use it when they make actual spray. And we could able, because of this, protected around 169,000 hectares of crop and grazing land from desert locust infestation. Next. We also, as I indicated, to replace the damaged crop, we provided with crop and fodder seed. We distributed around 410 quintals of maize emergency seed to 3,272 households to enable them to reclaim the damaged farmland, and they covered around 1,600 hectares of land and could able to produce 1,800 tons of food. Next. When we see the impact, the short-term impact that the project brought, the most significant change brought was the pasture land has been reclaimed because they completely avoided the locusts, and they freed their pasture land from the infestation, and also because of this, animal body condition and productivity has improved for the livestock, and the damaged crops were replaced, and this has significantly contributed to household food security. Next. Yeah, this is a picture of a woman has household head of household with her daughter. After receiving the seed, they planted, and they could able to recover their crop field. Next. Yeah, this is the harvest. You can see they store normally on tray. And thank you for listening me. And if you have question, I'm happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you very much for your presentation there, and also for covering the second half of your colleague Netsanet's part of the presentation. We really appreciate that. We've had some questions, so I've encouraged anyone that has a question to post that question in the chat, and I'm going to ask some of those questions to Solomon now. So one of the questions we had from Peter Solomon was, is it possible to trap the locusts and process them for food?
I'm not really sure if this is possible, but because of the feed culture and habit of the community, this is not acceptable. Even if they are starved, they are not willing, because it's against their culture of eating, eating habit. But it might have been tried somewhere, but it's not common in Ethiopia.
Okay, that's great. Another question has come in from Philippa, which is there any other way of controlling the locusts? Does the use of so much pesticides create any other problems?
Another method, in fact, is before spraying pests, another method to control the pest is to just make prediction and forecasts of the weather, and see when and how they can, or where they can hatch. Just before they hatch, to completely destroy where they are, because they are hatching in the desert place where there is no movement of people in the sand. They lay eggs in the sand. So even if you spray on the sand where there is no economic activity and anything, we can control before they migrate to another place. Another means is to exchange information among countries, because if it happens, let's say in Middle East, it can suddenly migrate to Ethiopia. So coordinated effort among neighboring countries is another means before actually making spray in the field. With the pesticide, in fact, we tried to use a pesticide with less impact on the environment, but as you know, chemical pesticides are no without environmental impact. They kill microorganisms, small insects like bees. But we made every precaution and trained the community so that they can make the necessary preparation before the actual spray happens. Another method is traditional protection method, which is not as such effective for the large swarm band of swarms, because you can't imagine the number. They are flying in millions and in billions, and sometimes they completely cover the sky, and you don't see the sun or the sky at all. And yeah, the situation is very worse, and wherever possible, we try to protect where before they hatch in the sand area, and once they happen, we make the necessary precautions.
Thank you. Thanks, Solomon. I've seen quite a couple of questions coming in the chat here with regards to some of the conflict in Ethiopia at the moment. And I know that that was a question that we spoke to you about previously. Does the internal conflict and violence over resources complicate either fighting the locusts or food distribution efforts in response to that?
Yeah, under normal circumstance where there is conflict, there is obviously obstacle in doing development works, but when we come to specifically come to our response using the Scottish Government fund, at a time when we were making response, there was no ethnic conflict in the location, because they had by then common enemy, which is desert locusts, and people were even collaborating to fight the desert locusts than fighting with each other. So we didn't really face any challenge from the ethnic conflict in the area when we were making this specific response.
Thanks, Solomon. Another question that had come in was, what is the Ethiopian government doing to support farmers affected by locusts?
Well, the government of Ethiopia has been doing much effort and unreserved effort in supporting the farmers to protect their farmland. It coordinated and collaborated with Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, who took the responsibility globally to make desert locust response. So jointly with the government, they mobilized and coordinated, mobilized helicopters and from different countries, from unaffected neighboring countries, from South Africa, from Israel, from other countries, to make aerial protection, aerial spray. That means when before crossing the border, for example, if there is a forecast that the desert locust is migrating from Yemen side, they just make the spray before it enters into the country in Ethiopia. So only a few desert locust group enter into the country, and once they enter, the government also make response, area response and manual response. So really the government is doing well to the extent it can. I mean, normally resource is very scarce, finance is very scarce, especially at the outset of the desert locust, since it doesn't have sufficient helicopters for making aerial spray. We were challenged by then, and crops were significantly damaged. But once that mobilization was done, there was a fair level of control.
Thank you. Thanks, Solomon. I've seen another question that's come in about there being crop spraying from the air, which you spoke a little bit about in the response to the last question. So does the spraying of crops put hazardous chemicals into the soil, making the planting of food crops difficult? That's to kind of build on Alistair's question there about there being any crop spraying from the air.
Sorry if I said crop spraying. I was to say pesticide spraying, not crop spraying. Well, as I indicated, pesticides are basically chemical pesticides, and there could be impact on the environment, on the soil properties, on the air itself. But we have to choose from the two evils. People have to survive first. Their crops needs to be protected. So we were forced to choose the less evil, which is spraying of pesticides. And in fact, it was recommended again by food and agricultural organizations, and this pesticide has less impact on the environment, and the type of pesticide selected has less impact, but the overall impact was not really studied. So this is how we responded, and it was not only Ethiopia actually who used these pesticides, but also other neighboring countries who are affected by desert locusts, the Middle East, and it stretches to the Sahel, to the West African area, and to Afghanistan. It follows that route. So the whole world is using these pesticides than getting their crops damaged and end up in starvation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Solomon. Another question that's come in from Jenny here. She says, many people in Western Europe don't cope mentally with disaster. How do Ethiopians cope with problems?
You know, we get used to different disasters, the natural disasters, conflicts, and man-made disasters. Ethiopia is very much endowed with different coping mechanism, these traditional coping mechanisms. They have strong social bondage. When some group of people are affected, they support each other. And yeah, because of very strong bondage and social capital that we have, which is not yet, I mean, dwindled like other countries, this social bondage and culture has helped to support each other. So yeah, this is how we are surviving.
That's great. A question, you spoke a little bit about COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 in Ethiopia. So Maureen has asked, how serious a problem in Ethiopia is COVID?
The level of seriousness is relative, frankly speaking. You can see the level of infection in America being more than 20 million against the level of infection in Ethiopia, which is more than 120 or 140,000. It has got basically to do with the ability to make testing. So Ethiopia could able to make around 2 million testing totally because of capacity normally. So the number of people known to be positive were only 120,000, and apart from that, we don't know the level of seriousness apart from the one which are found through testing. On the other hand, because of the way of living of Ethiopian people, it's really very, challenging, because we often come together frequently. We have different social gathering, and we have a communal way of life, especially in the rural areas. And even in some areas, whenever we make awareness in the rural areas, people are not at all accepting, and they are not willing to make the necessary precaution, even if we some protective personal equipment, and they give everything to God. So God will protect them completely, so they are not afraid in some places. It's only in some main towns and in cities where you can see people wearing masks, keeping their distance and all this, but in the rural areas it's really very, very challenging because of our way of life and the level of awareness people have normally.
Thank you. And move on to a question here from Jenny and Neil. They've asked, does the church or the local church in Ethiopia help people affected?
Yes, very, very significantly, I can say. We have different churches, Orthodox Church, Protestant Church mainly, Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, around 35% of the people are Orthodox Church believers, and the remaining are Muslim and Protestant, Catholic, and other believers. Normally, when such kind of emergencies happen in Ethiopia, the churches normally, including mosque, the first thing they do is to mobilize resources from different areas, be it from locally or from somewhere, and make every possible support. But you know, the significance and the level of challenge goes beyond the capacity of government and churches sometimes. So we rely on external support in this case.
That's great, and that kind of leads us on to ask then, what about the role of civil society as well as the church? What has their response been to the locust situation?
Civil societies and NGOs are making their best. The challenge is, you know, it's the financial absence of financial resource and the limited resource we have. It happened suddenly and it was not planned. So even organizations, civil societies, NGOs who are working long-term development, sometimes because of restricted nature of the fund, they can't allocate and move their fund to desert locust response. Otherwise, those who get resource or fund, they make response as much as possible in areas where they are operating.
Thank you, Solomon. A couple of questions here, just to go back to the situation with COVID in Ethiopia. You know, there's a lot of talk at the moment about vaccination and vaccination programs, and Liz and Kath have asked, will there be any kind of vaccination program in Ethiopia?
Not yet started. The Ministry of Health is trying to make arrangement with there is one global initiative, I think, COVAX, if you have heard about COVAX, which is organized by World Health Organization. It pools resources from different developed nations to buy vaccines and distribute to developing countries. So through COVAX, we are planning to get some number of vaccines after 1 month. So far, we haven't got any vaccines and no activity is being done, but preparation is being done by the Ministry of Health in collaboration with World Health Organization. That's the information that I have.
Great. Thank you, Solomon. Thank you very much. I think we will draw our question and answer session here to a close. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we end this part of the gathering?
No, not actually. Just to thank all the supporters and the audience and to listen to me patiently and for the very wonderful questions you raised to make clarification. It gave me a chance to further elaborate the areas which I didn't cover really. Thank you very much for your kindness and your, devotion in trying to support those people who are really in need of support. Thank you very much again.